Boom. According to that, I am live. Bit of a light boom there. Let's say it again. Boom. Welcome. This is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. I'm just going to turn down the gain so I'm not redlining there. This is me not having technical issues anymore. Yeah, sorry about the issue the other week where I had a cable that wasn't plugged in lying on the floor that was turned on that was causing static through the whole show. Sorry about that. This week, yeah, I used a different USB cable to plug in my mic and it wasn't detecting the mic properly, so I had to, plug it in again, do all that normal stuff. So that's why I was a little bit late, but still good to see you all. A few things to talk about tonight. So, yeah, quite looking forward to that. Also, yeah, nice to see everybody. Same time as always, of course, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Getting colder in Japan, but still best time of year. If you follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, all same Hiko Simon, you can see. I've been jogging a little bit. It's been busy with work and so on, but beautiful days at the moment. It really is the best time of year. Kind of amazing at the moment seeing the news from the United States about the impact of all of the tornadoes and stuff there. I mean, you always see all this tornado news from America, but really extraordinary at the moment. I don't know if anyone watching is the fact it covers so many states as well. Anyone affected by that, I hope everything is okay. Yeah, it's been fairly quiet. We had a decent earthquake today, although, again, we've been getting those like once every week. Same place as lately there has been some variation to the earthquakes here. They have been around sort of south of Tokyo and more inland and different, more unique places, but this was sort of the regular place, which is northern Ibaraki, which is where I'm guessing that they really started getting these swarms of quakes up there after the Fukushima quake, implying that's where all the stress in the tectonic plates shifted to after the Fukushima, after the Miyagi earthquake. Yeah, that's probably where the next big one's going to be. So another reminder today, but it's part of life here in Japan. The COVID situation I will mention in a moment. It's still good. We've just gone through our 31st day of having below 30 cases in Tokyo. Nationwide, the numbers are still incredibly low. At that said, they did catch, Tokyo had like 13 cases, but they caught 21 cases at the airport. So, it's just waiting for that one case to get through. But, the quarantine, apart from the fact they've pretty much, of course, ceased all travel for 1 month at the moment. So, really disrupting the plans of people who thought that they could get in, sometimes after waiting for nearly 2 years. They're saying it is for 1 year, and I don't really see yet the justification for I don't see Japan trying to become a zero COVID country like New Zealand and Australia tried to do. So we'll see how long that lasts. But yeah. Anyway, lots of people in the chat. I'm going to say hello, and I see some comments already. Remember, as Quint Rankin just did, you don't even have to @mark anymore. If you just type my name without misspelling it, it will flash orange like that, and that's a good way to get my attention. I will always respond, no matter how silly it is. So you can do that. We've got Shubhas from Panama in early. Great to have you with us, Shubhas, and congrats on being first. We've got Quint Rankid. Technical features, indeed. We had a technical feature. That is what that was. Cobras Tenshi, 2:30 p.m. there with cookies and coffee. So are you in Germany? Is that where you're at? It's a nice time of day there. Thank you for joining me in the middle of your day. We've got, who else we've got going through the comments here? Quint Rankid, we expect technical features. Yes, it's thank you for expecting them. It is an ongoing theme. I've got Aaron, welcome, moderator. Good to have you in here, and happy Sunday to you. We've got not that much there. Slight technical issue is the moment when product managers get nervous immediately. Yeah, that's what happens, I guess. Tai Nakamura, boom, good to see you. We've got EDIR, good to see you. Tai Nakamura, yes indeed, hanging loose. We've got Lysander 45. Got it right at the start. Yes, I was a little bit late, so I guess that lets everybody rock in, so that all worked out. Ada Void, good morning, good to have you with us once again. Tai Nakamura asking, is crypto popular in Japan? I don't know how you define popular. I know people who just do it. I guess, how popular is popular? People don't generally talk about that sort of stuff very much, but I know people who, when there were a couple of problems with some of the coin wallets having issues and getting hacked and so on, I knew people who were affected by it. I don't know how generally popular it is right now. Japanese are pretty conservative with finances. It is one thing. When I worked in American companies, everybody had shares. When the Lehman shock happened, all the Americans were like, head in their hands, and all the Japanese in the law firm that I was working at were like, oh, and I was with the Japanese. I was the same. I always felt every day like I had been losing out by not buying stocks, and I was thinking, how do I get started and what do I do? And I wasn't sure what to do. And then Lehman crashed, and I was like, oh, turns out I was right all along. I don't know if it really is smart from a life perspective, but people who are into it are into it. And there are, remember the Mt. Gox, some of the first cryptocurrency exchanges that were used, that were available globally, were set up in Japan. Of course, that one's famous because the founder kept all of the records on a Excel sheet and ran away with the money, and got convicted of doing bad things with that. But yes, that was a foreign guy, but it was in Japan. So I guess it's around. 270 AJ, hi, good to see you. Eric Bailey, don't worry. Oh, good. I'm very relieved to see you there. We were holding up the show. Glad that you can make it. We've got Tokyo 503, Japan. Yes, I'm about. This is, of course, one of the key topics today. Now produces so much milk that it needs to dump tons, not just tons, 5,000 tons. So over the next few weeks, why can't this excess milk be used to create butter and cream, both of which Japan has massive shortages of? Well, we'll get to that. But yes, indeed. Expect me to go off. There's a butter news story today, and it's in the opposite direction. Kerberos Tenshi in Germany. There we go. Sunday, the third Advent. Oh, of course, you have the Christmas goes for like 25 days there, right? It's fun. Yeah, no, I respect how the Germans do Christmas. I have nothing better to do but enjoy Tokyo tonight. Well, there we go. It's I'm sorry you have nothing better to do, but good to have you with us. We got Black Tengu, the representative from Greece. Better safe than sorry when it comes to money matters. Yeah, but you know what? I mean, even in banks, it's not entirely safe. I mean, the guaranteed savings level is like about 100,000, which is nice, but if you've got like retirement savings and stuff like that, it's hard to know where it's safe to put it, honestly, in the event of a crisis. But yeah, I guess there again, I'm just realizing, connecting the dots. Of course, you were in Greece, so you had the big defaults there and all the banks getting into trouble, and that's the situation. Japan has worse debt than Greece had when it defaulted. So it's all domestically held. We don't owe the money to Germany, so we're in a slightly better situation. But it's kind of scary, and I don't know if I'm better off or not. Maybe crypto is what I should be doing. But yeah, Sergeant Bilko, good to see you in here. Swedish representative. We've got everybody. I love it. BTC Chiba, peace indeed. We've got the Butter Gods have gifted us a story for Hiko. Indeed, they have. And that is all the people. Remember, couple of things. First of all, as you can see, I thought it'd be fun to try monetizing this channel for a while, and I do this for the fun. I don't do it for the monetization. I thought maybe monetizing it might make it more fun, and it turned out it didn't really, so I turned it all off. So I am just doing this for kicks and likes. I mean, it's like basically paying me for peanuts, except that peanuts even cost technically money and clicks and likes do not. So yes, definitely do hit that like button, support the channel. I do appreciate that. And if you are in the actually even more than the likes, what I appreciate is when people are watching, just say hello, say where you're from. I do just love to see where people are watching from. I do get a real kick out of how diverse the audience here is and how great everybody is in the comments. So remember, just say my name in the comments and I will get to you. And whoa, Tai Nakamura, first 2 weeks investing in crypto, you made $700. That's pretty awesome. I hope it wasn't like Dogecoin or anything like that. I mean, that's cool. But there are. Be careful, dude. That's it. You don't want to get scammed or anything like that. But that is pretty awesome. And set yourself. Well, again, don't take it. I shouldn't be giving anyone financial advice. I'm not good at this sort of thing. But my general philosophy is, even if it looks like it's going to go to the moon and you think you've got to hold on, for the ride forever, dude, maybe set yourself a mental target. Like, okay, I'm not going to take all the money out, but I'm going to take this amount of money out when it gets to this threshold to make sure that you're not like got it all in there forever and you lose it all. But wow, that is awesome. $700 in 2 weeks. That is you're convincing me. Mr. Cordy Chep is a Martian. Good to know. We've got DJ Sunnyside Up. Congrats indeed. EDII people tell one thing you're never going to hear on this channel is crypto advice. I'll probably get into it when it's already fully normalized and isn't a bubble anymore, and I'll probably regret it, but yeah. Still, that is awesome, Ty. I'm kind of jealous. Maybe I'm going to need to ask you to tell me about it sometime. Anyway, let's dive into the topics. It is 10:45 p.m. Japan Standard Time. There are a few things to talk about tonight. First of all, just what's going on with COVID. I just mentioned that 31st day in a row we've had below 30 cases in Tokyo. And nationwide, the numbers are also pretty low. But yeah, the one thing is that during this week, the numbers have gone from being like 10 or 15 every day to like 20, 25. These numbers are still ridiculously small in a city of 14 million. Of course, these are not absolute numbers because Tokyo and Japan doesn't do widespread mass testing. We're not trying to catch every case. They're just trying to manage the the serious cases, which, by the way, there are 3 serious cases in Tokyo right now. So even from that perspective, I mean, this is the thing. While you might be missing asymptomatic people, the number might not be absolute or accurate. So, for example, when you get was serious? No. PV. If it really was, I'd be cutting, well, I mean, 5 Bitcoin, they're like $4,000 each right now, aren't they? That would be kind of crazy. Thank you, PB. I appreciate it. Coming back, I got distracted. Yeah. Well, while, for example, New Zealand has like 4 or 5 million people and has 130 cases right now, many of those cases are probably asymptomatic and would never be caught in Japan because, we don't do that kind of screening. That said, you can't really hide 3 serious cases in intensive care, and that's what Japan has right now. As in most places, it seems to be mostly people who are unvaccinated, and I think we've gotten up to nearly 80% of the population now, like 70. In fact, Ninja Monkey, I actually just watched his latest video this evening where he confirmed 79% of the total population has had 1 shot, 77% have had 2 shots, but nearly 100 million people are double vaccinated, which is crazy. And it is people who are not vaccinated who are ending up in ICUs, so it's another reason to get it. I mean, I've been pretty much okay with both of the shots, so I'm not going to hesitate to get the booster shot. Even if Omicron is more mild, that's great, but, I'm just looking at it now like getting flu shots. Personally, that's just me. However, this is Japan. We do not ask people it is a funny thing as well. I'm hearing a lot from other countries about how there are vaccine mandates, and in Australia and places like you have to have proof of vaccination to go to work, and you can be fired for not being vaccinated. Situation in Japan, which, by the way, has this crazy 80% of total population not eligible people. They can't vaccinate people under 12, and yet nearly 80% of people are vaccinated. Yet there is no, we're actually warned at work, managers were warned, do not ask your staff if they're vaccinated or not, because it would be considered an infringement of their privacy and harassment. Particularly, some people have sensitivity to shots and whatever, and they can't get them, and they don't want medical discrimination against people. So there's this really big sensitivity in Japan about not violating people's privacy by asking them if they're vaccinated or not. You work on the assumption that there are unvaccinated people in every group, and that sort of is dictating why, for example, I'm still working remotely all the time. But it's kind of funny how even without all the coercion that you have in other countries, Japan's just gone and done it, and we're in a better situation for it. So it's another reason I appreciate being in Japan. But yeah, cases are still low. They are creeping up. And sooner or later, right now, all the Omicron cases in Japan are being caught at immigration, but they are bound to get through at some point, and it's going to spread, and we'll find out what happens. One other thing that was interesting was, I think I've mentioned a couple of times how like the orders for restaurants and bars and so on to close at like 8 p.m. or and not serve alcohol and so on, and to try to get the little rainbow symbol saying that we're doing, we're complying with guidelines from the Tokyo government to ensure, separation and, spreading out and all that sort of stuff. But there was no real enforcement of that. It was all voluntary, and I thought it was, again, remarkable because it was clear. You go home and, most places are closed, but some places that decided to ignore the orders and, for whatever reasons, like they were going out of business, they needed to sort of stay alive or whatever, would stay open. And I must admit, I kind of thought it was kind of nice that generally people were going along with it, but the government wasn't going to kill people, punishing them if they stayed open. That said, the Tokyo government has now gone all around and is sort of rounding up those companies that during the last wave, a month and a half ago, that were open and were violating the request to close, are now getting fined roughly about $2,600 each. So not a big fine, although I assume they're going to get named and shamed for it as well. But certainly nothing that would make your business close down, but enough to sort of, a little bit of a sting for those businesses. For me, it's interesting just the fact that they are enforcing this at all. And I think that will be considered controversial because it is all considered to be voluntary. But again, and it works because most places go along with it. But this is the first time I've actually seen actual measures being taken against places that didn't comply with those orders. The other thing is that, of course, we had the huge drama last week of Japan declaring we're closing the borders and even to Japanese returning to the country, and then they changed their mind 24 hours later. Now they're doing like a 1 month kind of hold on everything. Japan Airlines and the airline companies obviously feeling the pain over this. They are probably based on their conversations with the Ministry of Transport and obviously wanting to reassure their stockholders that they're not about to go out of business, because JAL has been in that situation before, saying that they expect that flights will probably start recovering again in February, which I hope means that there should be some resumption to opening. I was getting pessimistic about this. In fact, I am still pessimistic about this. I was really hopeful that we could start seeing, actually, there were plans that even within December we would start to see students and business visa people coming in, and that's been pushed back to January. I think February is even optimistic at this point, because clearly the Omicron, and clearly we're going to have a sixth wave in Tokyo, so I would think we might be talking like June or July at this point. But if the head of JAL is saying February, well, that's a pretty good sign. So, we don't know anything for sure, but that's, I guess, some good news. So that's really the COVID situation here in Tokyo. Into the chats. What do we got here? We've got, again, thank you, PB. I do appreciate that. We've got Jody Jefferson. I don't know what you're talking about there, but still nice to have you in the comments. No comments directed towards me. So, Greece is fining all of those people who are not vaccinated €100 per month. Well, I guess that would do it. I suppose at some point. I mean, it is funny. There were so many expats here who felt like, it was sort of their duty to... There is this sort of thing, I think, that happens with a lot of particularly Western foreigners in Japan, that they feel this sort of missionary zeal that, they need to lecture people in Japan about, don't be an anti-vaxxer. And when they see a poll saying that Japanese are not totally sure about this new vaccine or not, a lot of people just reacted, oh, Japanese are anti-vaxxers, we must condemn them and chase them and harass them. And that is that instinct to go and hit them with bats and find them and do all this sorts of thing, which is pretty much the norm in a lot of Western countries. And, and yet Japan has sort of done it better without all of that. Again, it's just something I like about this country, and it does also... my reaction was, I think people are thinking about it and they're cautious about it, but it doesn't mean that they're anti-vaxxers, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to do it. There are anti-vaxxers in Japan like there are everywhere, and there are even some noisy ones. But the thing to remember is, if you ever see like some right-wingers at a train station, waving the war flags and, saying all sorts of, unintelligible stuff, or you see anti-vaxxers, or you see, Martians are living among us, or whatever you see at the train stations, take note, they've got big loudspeakers, but they're typically not more than 10 people. Honestly, I would consider them to be probably a percentage of them have mental health issues. And remember, you're in a city of 35 million people, and you can go to Shibuya and Shinjuku, and they make a big noise, but they're typically like 10 people out of 35 million that are doing this. Statistically, I would say that in itself is still abnormally low, even in the best situation. So, Japan's doing okay. I guess that's what my point continues to be. It kind of sucks. I do wish I could travel for the end of the year. I wish I could go to New Zealand. I wish I could go to Australia. But I can't. That's life. I'm hoping somehow, I think next year, I don't know this is ever going to go away at this point, but I think we're going to figure out how to live with it and go back to some kind of normal with extra precautions next year, and I'm looking forward to that. But as things go, I guess a lot of people would rather spend the pandemic in a place that's closer to family, and not be sort of far away from home and stranded. But I'm kind of way past that phase. This is definitely home for me, and of places to objectively be, I think Japan's been pretty good, as I've said before. Martians, Mr. Cordy Cheb, not you specifically, but generally perhaps. Mr. Kerberos Tenchi, I think a lot of people just assume that people from other countries behave just like those in their home country. Hence, I dislike the country-to-country comparison concerning the Rona. I mean, on the one hand, it's tough, isn't it? People are people. And, you know, a-holes exist everywhere, mentally ill people exist everywhere. The idea that there are a certain percentage of the population that are always going to just vehemently reject what the government's telling them to do, or science is telling them, or the TV is telling them. There just seems to be in humanity a percentage of that. They exist everywhere. People who believe conspiracies on the internet, people who troll and do all that sort of stuff. So I think there are commonalities, but yeah, culture is clearly a big factor in, you know, both in how governments behave and in how people react to how governments behave. But yeah, I think Japanese people, I feel like people sometimes think, for example, one thing that drives me up the wall is say, oh, of course Japanese do it because they're very obedient, you know, they're very submissive and obedient, which is buying into some, you know, pretty awful and inaccurate stereotypes if you know Japan pretty well. I think there's other things. It's not people demurring to the samurai, and this idea that Japan is hierarchical as well, I think, is also quite wrong. You know, Japan, being a manager, being a boss, is really tough. It's a really egalitarian. It's basically like anyone who sticks up gets their head chopped off kind of a society. There is social control, but it's not top down. It's side to side. People, you know, on the train, people control behavior through dirty looks, through the evil eye, you know, and it works. And, you know, you have to be, and that said, that you have to be a real raging a-hole to survive the social pressure of all the dirty looks you're going to get for being an a-hole. And those people exist as well in the road rage cases and whatever you can see them. But it just operates on a bunch of different principles. That's the cool thing about culture. And it's both good, but it drives a lot of people crazy. It's why a lot of Japanese people can't live here, because of the constant social pressure. And it's not pressure from above on people, it's pressure on each other. And this is a sort of situation which lends itself to that, right? When there's sort of equalized social pressure. But yeah, PB Quantum Magazine had a recent piece that took a deep dive into the background and capabilities of the JWST. I don't know what that stands for. Fingers crossed the launch and setup goes off without a hitch. The James Webb Space Telescope. Yeah, that thing is insane. I talked about that at length last week. But man, when the photos start coming in from that, hopefully at the end of January, it'll take about a month for it to get going in orbit. That's going to release some mind-blowing stuff. Like, that's going to, like, transform. It's going to be like the freaking monolith in 2001. It's actually going to, I think, advance humans' understanding of the universe in ways. It's going to be mind-blowing. And the thing is, it's 6 meters. It is an enormous telescope to put into space, but it's like put a 100-meter telescope into space. It's like, I can't wait for, you know, it's just the start. But yes, I am just as excited as you, PB. Quint Rankid, careful. Sometimes fringe groups move into control and change societies in strange ways. Indeed they do. Indeed they do. I mean, Japan, perfect example, by the way. In fact, there's a video which I'm going to recommend at the end of this from a history channel that I love called Extra Credits and Extra History. And they're doing a series, weekly series now. They do these animated kind of storytelling, kind of fun storytelling, often about quite dark history. But they put together the history on different things very, very well. This will probably be a 5-part series. This is how long they normally run. And this is on how Japan became militarist. And they point out at the beginning, unlike Germany, Japan was never fully authoritarian. And the militarist factions never obtained democratic control. They were fringe groups, but they were able to, through, you know, extreme tactics, through assassinations and intimidation, were able to gain control, while Japan was still, much more than Germany, actually still functioning as a democracy through the war, in spite of the images. It's something which people don't understand very well. So even in this country, yeah, fringe groups, I mean, you know, and look at the impact. I mean, this is exactly what Ulm wanted to do. So yes, you're absolutely right, Quint Rankid, well said. Iraq, hey, good to see Iraq. Good to have you with us. DJ Sunny Side Up. The sheep can see you next after COVID. Oh, yeah, the sheep will be waiting indeed. Kerberos Tenchi, I think Japanese people mostly do it because they're considerate to other people. That's how I see it. But being considerate is a two-edged sword. Hey, Tokyo Matt, thank you for subscribing. It's a double-edged sword. I come from a country that actually has a similar thing. It's this combination of people act very considerate, but they act considerate because they grow up understanding the terrible social sanctions of not being considerate, that you will be lynched for not being considerate. New Zealand is very much like that as well, particularly compared to like America and Australia, where, you know, you can be sort of eccentric. New Zealand is more towards Japan on that. And yeah, I think it is good. People are nice, or they act nice. And they are forced to suppress their other instincts, which is good and kind of not good, right? If you're an a-hole, I mean, there is a belief in a lot of parts of the world that you should have the right to be an a-hole and not have to suppress your true personality. I kind of like countries where people do suppress those tendencies, but you know, but you pay a price for that. Super 9, handle name I don't recognize, welcome to it. What's my experience hiring internationally into Japan recently? How do I expect it to change in the new year? I hire almost exclusively in Japan when I hire for work. In fact, I go for I've hired foreigners who live in Japan. There is a transfer I've been talking about. There's somebody waiting to transfer over to Japan that I would just love to have on my team. It's not me hiring that, though. He's in a different group, but and it's frustrating. I've been waiting for 21 months for that. And I get hyped up. Oh, cool, he's going to be here soon, and he's not. So I don't think at the moment hiring people overseas into Japan is something you should even engage in, honestly, until things become a little bit more stable. It'd be incredibly frustrating, mostly for the person being hired. Obviously, because it's so disruptive to their life, not knowing if you're going to have a job starting or not. And I think the procedure would be right now is that if you're joining an international company, that you would probably be best to start working overseas, joining the overseas offices. So no, I don't have experience of, even before the pandemic, I've never hired people from overseas. The expectation is where I am that they're here. So, that they'd come in here. But, right now, I'd imagine hiring from overseas is pretty much mostly frozen, which is a shame because there are skills that Japan needs, and particularly in IT, that are not plentiful in Japan, like AI engineering and so on. And I suppose the best way is to figure out a way to work remotely. But not a lot of places are doing that. Where I am does that, but I haven't seen a situation yet of having someone specifically on a team in Japan where they're actually working in Europe or in America. So yeah, we'll wait and see. Love all the comments, by the way. Thank you, everybody, and nice to see new names as well. Cobras Teshi, wish people more considerate in Germany. People of else. I think people feel like that about that country. I don't have an overwhelmingly negative. I have an image of Germans being very direct. In fact, I had a German landlord in New Zealand. He was very direct. But I don't think they're inconsiderate anyway. But I understand the perception. Anyway, we are up to half an hour, so I'm going to keep charging through. A very interesting one from the start of the week. This is really unusual. The U.S. Embassy issued a warning to U.S. citizens in Japan that there are reports of foreigners being stopped and searched by police in suspected racial profiling incidents. Several were detained. The problem with this, well, there's two things. Really only two pieces of information we have about this. One is exactly what it says, and we can only speculate about what happened. The other piece of information is that the U.S. Vast majority of American citizens in Japan are U.S. military, of course, and Americans make up a very, very small minority among the different foreigner groups in Japan. But generally speaking, Americans are among the better treated, and the American government is very, very close to the Japanese government, and so doesn't generally put out inconvenient and arbitrary statements towards the Japanese government. So a warning like this is super unusual, and it implies something serious must have happened. Two things. I mean, we can only speculate what it is because there's no information about the incidents that triggered it. There's, I guess, two possibilities. One is that maybe someone from the embassy was actually subjected to this, and they wanted to get back a little bit. But more likely, just taking this more on face value, is exactly what it says happened. That multiple people, I guess, who are U.S. citizens who are able to report to the embassy are experiencing being stopped. And it says searched and detained by the police. A lot of people started speculating in response to this what was going on, because that's all you can do. And hey, it's Twitter, so why not? And a lot of people started saying, hey, in fact, I must admit, even I'm slightly guilty of speculating in this direction, that, maybe these were just white privileged social justice warrior people who think that they have the same rights in Japan as they have in America, and when a policeman tries to ask them for their ID, maybe they've seen sovereign citizen channels on YouTube. And by the way, I've been watching Audit the Audit on YouTube, and I'm quite enjoying it. It looks critically at auditors, Fourth Amendment auditors, people testing police to see if they'll provoke them into detaining them illegally or not, which just strikes me as a really terrible thing to do in general. But it's a great channel. But again, you can see there's a lot of people out there who think that they can bait police and so on in these situations in the US, and you can. You've got a lot of protections from arbitrary detention in most countries. But the thing is, even in the United States, if you are an alien, if you are a non-citizen, your rights, your protections from arbitrary detention are much, much less, as they are in almost every country. In most countries in the world, if you are a non-citizen and you are present, you are required to have proof of your status on you at all times, which normally is the foreigner card, although if you don't have a foreigner card, it can be a passport or another equivalent document. But yeah, even when you're a tourist somewhere, people don't realize you don't have these rights. So some people are assuming that, oh, this must have just been some a-hole baiting the Japanese police and so on, and and they got in trouble for it. Of course, a lot of people pointing out we don't know that was a fact, and in fact, it's quite possible that these could have been, the same sort of police racial profiling and abuse that we hear about, and that certainly exists in other countries. And no reason to think that Japanese police are any less capable of being arbitrary and racist or whatever. And certainly I know that there are people, Akasan is a person who talks about getting stopped a lot. And, he's a big guy, he's got big colored dreadlocks and so on. And I think he's taken videos of himself while he's being detained and searched by the police multiple times, like going through Shibuya and so on. And you can sort of see the police have clearly just singled him out by his appearance and stopped him and are hassling him. And with the appearance, I guess there's multiple aspects of that. I mean, he stands out. But they seem convinced that if they searched him, they'd find drugs on him. And he's like, go ahead. And there are none. I remember watching a video of this, and yeah, it was shocking. And I've never experienced this. I've been stopped by the police once, riding late at night in Shibuya on a bicycle with a broken light. So it looked kind of suspicious. But yeah, that said, I know people who, probably are not used to being stopped by the police, Caucasian people or whatever, who have had jobs where they have to work late at night because they're traders, and they get stopped like every time. In fact, one guy was complaining he got stopped like 5 times in the same week by the same police box on the same road on Yasukunidori, and was actually saying like it was almost like they were deliberately harassing him. Speaking personally, I've been here for 23 years and I've been like stopped once by the police, and it was a cordial nothing encounter that I kind of understood. But yeah, given that people talking about, for example, I saw someone saying on Twitter that they were sitting on the train and they noticed the person beside them open up their cell phone and in Japanese started Googling why are foreigners still allowed to be in Japan? So I could imagine also scenarios of nervous, racist is a strong term, but certainly ignorant Japanese people mistakenly believing based on news broadcasts that somehow, they've kicked all of us out of the country and we're not allowed in, and how a foreigner is allowed here, and does this person have germs? I have also noticed, by the way, the gaijin seat, I haven't used the train very much, but even when the train's been crowded, I've noticed there have been moments, not constantly, people generally will come and sit next to me. Sometimes, that seat will be open next to me for a while, even when the train is quite crowded. So I guess there is that fear that, oh, what if that's the Transformer Omicron, he must be a Decepticon. I guess you must get that. But yeah, it certainly seems like there are, the fact that the US Embassy has called this out implies an abnormal increase in these sorts of cases. The PSA that I would give to this, that I should have gotten to a lot sooner, is that, yeah, the police can stop you. So someone called me out on this and corrected me and said, oh no, to ask you for your ID, they must have just cause, which is true. But, if basically for police, just cause can be suspicion that you're not carrying your proof of ID that you're required to call with you, that you're required to carry with you, i.e. police in Japan, as in most countries, frankly, if you're a foreigner, the only excuse they need to ask you for your ID is a belief that you might not have your ID on you and that you have to show it to prove it, i.e. basically they don't need any excuse. And if you refuse to show your ID and they suspect that you don't have it on you, then that's a crime and you can be arrested and deported for it. And you don't want to end up in immigration detention. I've talked about that before. People die there. It's again not normal prison. It's not normal jail. You've got like it's like being sent to freaking Guantanamo. So you do not want to get, and you can get in that situation for just being stroppy with police. So I guess two things: be aware that being a dick towards police officers will never work out well here because they have all the powers and rights and you do not. But that said, assuming that these people were, cooperating and were being singled out for no good reason, I guess it's something to be aware of and to take care of. And it's very sad and disappointing to hear, but I guess it happens. And again, I'd be really curious to hear what triggered this, but still interesting. And again, just to repeat, you're entitled to ask the police to identify themselves and to explain the reason that they're doing this and so on. But at the end of the day, they don't need a lot to be able to, and pretty much any police can make up an excuse in any situation to ask you for your ID. And really the only way that you can avoid that is by being a Japanese citizen, which I guess is an increasing thing, but still quite rare, for at least for people that appear to be from a foreign background. So yeah, really interesting that this happened. Anyway, into the comments. So we got Germany, we got DJ Sunny Side Up, gotta sleep, daughter is sick. Yeah, oh, hope your daughter gets better soon. Take care and get some sleep there. Black Tango, how about Logan Paul was never detained and bounced off a Pokemon? Well, exactly. This is the other thing as well. I think it's also true that Japanese police, in any situation here, you get a pretty long leash in Japan. The police are not in your face detaining people all over the place. And in the case of foreigners, I mean, Japanese talk about how, particularly in rural prefectures, when they pull over a foreigner or someone with an international driver's license and the police just don't know what to do and it's just a hassle. So you kind of get a bit of diplomatic immunity with that. I knew people who talked about like getting away with drunk driving and speeding and all sorts of stuff because the police just didn't want to deal with a foreigner. So you get that. You do get a long leash, but once the police decide, okay, you are now, I am now going to focus on you, it's over, right? So again, you don't want to end up, you don't want to antagonize or push your luck with the police. Just be polite, cooperate, and get the hell out, is my general advice. Don't believe that you've got any kind of rights to talk or act like a dick towards police here. Same everywhere, of course, but Japanese police are pretty mild-mannered and they're pretty invisible, I think, by standards of places I've been to. But when they decide, if they're looking for a criminal or something like that, and the first person that they grab, they just hold them without access to a lawyer or being able to tell anyone where they are. They basically kidnap someone and hide them and hold them until they confess to it. And people will confess. Generally, after 72 hours in Western countries, a confession is considered to be coerced, and yet they can detain you for weeks in Japan. So they pretty much get everyone to confess, and that's how they have a high conviction rate. So you don't want to mess with the police anywhere, but especially not in Japan. Easy way to make police uncomfortable so they let you go quickly is wearing a kilt. I think that might draw attention, but it's good to know. Thank you for the tip, Kerberos. We've got Eder saying, I think Anglo cultures often jump to race if there is seemingly something unfair going on. It may just be that you stick out. True, if you have a business suit, nobody stops you. Not necessarily true. Well, my friend's case wasn't that, but yeah, I think it's true anywhere in the world. A suit will get you by. Certainly, I mean, socioeconomics plays a part. But race probably does play a part. And look, I'm certainly aware that, while I'm a foreigner, I am not treated or looked at the same as other types of foreigners. And that's ridiculous and stupid and unfair. But that is the case, that when I talk with other foreigners that have different ethnic backgrounds to me, they have very different experiences of equivalent situations in Japan. And so, it is so weird that my privilege extends to a country where I am a minority, but it does, and I'm mindful of that. But certainly I think there's so much sensitivity to it in Western countries right now, just because of the history of of absolute, injustice, and how horrible people from my background have been to other people based on race. Yeah, sure, we transpose that, oh, we were really racist, so Japanese must be racist too, and I think that's kind of wrong. But I think the universality of bad people existing and abusing power when it's given to them, which can happen with police, I think that's true. One Johnson, scariest story I have on police and a Westerner. Scariest story I have on police and a Westerner. I can talk about a couple. The one that's closest to me is when I played rugby. Yeah, gather around, kids. I'll tell you a scary police story involving a foreigner that I'm familiar with. I think I've told the story before, but I'll try to say it quickly. There's a rugby team. There are like basically three rugby clubs in Tokyo. In fact, it's probably more than that. There's Tokyo. There's All France, which I used to play for. Tokyo Crusaders, Tokyo Gaijin, and there's YCAC, and there's a couple of others. But one of the Gaijin clubs, anyway, was going out to karaoke, as they often did. Big lads drank a bit too much. And apparently, being drunk and young and rugby players and stupid, some people in a karaoke bar, apparently one of the big fellas there fell asleep. And the other guys who were there with him thought it would be kind of funny to sneak out of the place and leave the big drunk guy with the bill for the karaoke place. And it can get quite expensive. So apparently when they snuck out, there are cameras in karaoke rooms, by the way. So when the staff realized that everyone had kind of snuck out and there was only like one guy left there, the staff went up into the room and woke up the guy. And they were kind of pissed off. They could see everyone skipping the bill. And they said, hey, you're over time. You've got to pay the bill. And, they shook the guy and woke him up and were getting very aggressive with him, saying that he had to pay. So he responded by punching. He was drunk and he was woken up. He was roused with very aggressive people. He didn't know what was going on. He started punching the staff. And, when that happened, more staff came and it turned into a bit of a melee. But this was a big guy, so he kind of hit some more people. And then he basically was trying to get out of the room and escape. One of the foreigners who had sort of ran outside and had left him felt bad for him and thought, hey, I better go and check everything's okay. So he ran back and ran in the situation where the melee was happening, and apparently tried to calm the situation and stop the fight or whatever, and basically, sort things out. But eventually, the staff told them both to get out and they left. And a couple of days later, both the guy who woke up and the guy who went back in to go and fix things were arrested by the police all of a sudden. And basically, these people just disappeared from the world. It was like they had been abducted. Nobody knew what had happened to them. But apparently, they had been arrested. And they had been arrested not just for the assault. They were both arrested and charged with the same things, for the assault of the staff, as well as for aggravated robbery. Well, for robbery, because they considered them leaving without, even though they were told to get out, they were seen as trying to evade the bill. So that was seen as a robbery. Another thing about Japan, if you do martial arts or you do any kind of sport that's considered equivalent to martial arts, and rugby is considered equivalent to martial arts, in Japan it happens that people who could do martial arts will get into these one-punch killer person kind of situations. It happens. And so if you are someone who does judo or karate or aikido, or you play rugby, or you do kickboxing, and you get into a fight, that is considered assault with a deadly weapon. Literally, hands can be treated as deadly weapons in Japan. There are no guns, so they treat fists in that situation, if you like. And rugby players, so basically this is considered aggravated assault. They treated this like it was an armed robbery, where they physically assaulted the staff. So really, really serious charges, which were facing like 10 to 20 years in prison, both of them. Frankly speaking, the large guy who was roused from his sleep was pretty much considered a bit of a thug, and there wasn't a lot of sympathy for him. However, the guy who went back in to sort of be the peacemaker and sort the situation out, this was considered a mistake, that people thought this would help, this would get sorted out, and was a mistake. But the police decided to stick to their guns. First of all, it took weeks before people even found out where he was. And even when they did find out, and even when it was pretty clear what his story was and that he really wasn't, he was going in to sort things out, it was like the police wouldn't leave him out of detention until his trial, which was more than 12 months later. He was in jail or in prison for more than a year, where he became the 0.1% of cases that go to trial, and he was found innocent. But he was effectively served. It ended up being like an 18-month sentence, even though he was in the end found not guilty. And the other guy ended up in jail for a long time. And this is a scenario that I think if you've ever been out drinking in Roppongi, and you know, there's always like one person who gets out of control. And geez, try drinking with rugby players. Believe me, this is a very real scenario. This was the good guy who went back to try and go and do the right thing to sort it out. Yeah, he ended up losing 1.5 years of his life in jail for it. And that was just the police, once they decided to press charges and so on, once they decided to get these guys, even when the stories were straight or whatever, they just were like, no. And this guy was only able to really hold up partly because, of course, the community had a lot of people who had access to a lot of legal resources. Of course, the rugby playing community, there were a lot of lawyers and people from law firms and so on. There's a lot of support for this guy, and there's a bit of a campaign around it. But thinking about how easily this could happen to people without those resources and how they might end up. I mean, you might end up in jail for 15 to 20 years for that sort of situation. So, yeah, that's a pretty bad situation that could happen. So, one Johnson, I'm glad if that's your scary story. I hope that did the job. The J-Vlog, have a drinking buddy who happens to be a Japanese cop. Well, I guess that's probably a good thing to have in reserve for when you need it. I do remember when I got qualified as a lawyer in New Zealand, all my surfing friends, some of whom would sometimes get up to things that they probably shouldn't. I remember I went to a friend's wedding, and one of them had mentioned Simon just became a lawyer, and they all came up to me one by one. It was like the freaking Godfather, and they were like, "Hey, dude, if anything ever happens, please look after me." Oh, dude, I'm like a sheep lawyer. I'm not qualified in this country. But some of them had good reasons to come up to me and say that, even though I couldn't help them. So yes. Oops, meant Japanese. Eric Bailey, it's been your experience that Japanese police are more likely to be apathetic than over-aggressive. I think you're right. But the point is, once they decide to lock on, you are screwed. So, don't push your luck is my advice. Iraq, 20 years without being stopped. I've been stopped like once. So, yeah. Mr. Cordy Chep has heard the story. Have you heard the story from me? He got pinged with paying for the damage. Yeah, I mean, they tore it. Yeah, they caused a big mess. But he got into a melee with the staff, which he shouldn't have. I'm sure I've told the story before, but or have you heard the story separately? But yeah. Anyway, there were two people involved, and one guy was considered to be not as sympathetic as the other, although still pretty scary. Anyway, back into the stories. Only 7 minutes left. I started late, so I can go over a little bit. Interesting that Abe, like for recent years with this inflation problem, I've talked about how Japan's been trying to cause inflation, and now it's happening with oil prices, and they're panicking and trying to stop it. But that's because it's not the good inflation. What they want is wage-led inflation, where employers pay people more money, and people having more money buy more stuff, and buying more stuff causes prices to go up. They want a positive cycle of inflation, not oil prices, crushing the economy. And for years now, the LDP has been saying, hey, employers, we're the LDP, we're your best friends in government. We'd really like it if you'd pay people a little bit more, please, so we can start this sort of economic virtuous cycle that's going to help your businesses in the end anyway. And all the employment federations every year say, yeah, nah. And they've been pretty much doing that. And Abe's done it. As popular as Abe was, the employers wouldn't go along with it. And pretty much every year, this has been kind of a cycle. They've been basically telling the LDP to shove it up their backsides. And so Kishida started the same dance this year. He said, yeah, we'd really like the Employers Federation this year to finally please pay people more money. It is funny how often people think of the LDP as purely like a Republicans or Tories or whatever. And they are in some respects, but in respects like this, where they're basically siding with the labor unions in the business negotiations. I mean, Japan, the LDP is way more left-wing than the Democrats, for example. I mean, there are certain ways that you measure that, but, universal health care, collectivized agriculture, and with this as well, control of the economy. The whole Kishida's new capitalism is basically more respect for worker rights. It's actually way more socialist than the Democrats are in America. For nothing is left, at least as socialist as this exists anywhere in America. They actually people I think sort of transpose what it is with what they know. Yeah, he's saying that not only do they want companies to please pay the workers more people, but if they don't, they're going to deny them access to other business benefits and tax benefits. This is something, by the way, which the Japanese government used a lot in the 90s to coerce behavior by car companies and banks and so on to do certain things, to make certain types of cars. The whole reason the K cars exist is a combination of withholding tax benefits if they don't make them and granting tax benefits if they do make them. It's how Japanese government controls companies. The fact that they're pulling that card out to make companies pay their workers more, that's pretty unprecedented, but it shows how they're kind of sick of asking politely, because they've been asking for a long time. So it will be very interesting to see. I guess this is part of the new capitalism, that they actually want capitalism where the capitalist companies pay the workers more, and why not? It's kind of ridiculous how large companies have just been sort of completely locked down for all of this time. Yes, comments are up to date. I'm going to go on to the next one. Milk. We mentioned about milk. There'd be some milk rage. So apparently what happened is, well, for a start, I've mentioned this before, Japan, like New Zealand, by the way, has these agricultural boards, cooperatives that basically serve to aggregate a lot of small farmers into one large, body that basically represents all of the farmers and enables them to engage in marketing and distribution and so on a group basis, as if they were one big company. And this is called J-Milk, the Japan Dairy Board, and they effectively in Japan have been so successful they've been able to lobby, for example, for the government to block competition for imported dairy products, saying that milk is just as vital to the national security of Japan as rice is, which is ridiculous. And that they can, by basically, rather than allowing free market control of production and so on, matching demand with production, they should just be trusted that they can satisfy that it'll be better for Japan's national interest that they be able to generate all dairy needs in Japan domestically, and that they be sheltered from competition. And trust them, they know what they're doing. They'll make sure that there is enough milk at any time because they will control production. The result of this a couple of years ago, as I've talked about before, was that they didn't manage production. They couldn't produce enough milk. There was butter shortages, and there was rationing and queues, and there was like cookie shortages. It was apocalyptic. You were only allowed to buy one stick of butter in the supermarket. It was post World War II stuff, and I talked about how ridiculous this was in a world full of butter. That a country like Japan is like voluntarily subjecting itself to post World War II style rationing of dairy products. Well, they didn't want to be caught in that situation again, so they told everybody after this, please, milk like crazy. Just get all the milk, milk as much as possible. We don't care. Just don't stop. And they've been doing that for 2 years now. And now the problem is that it turns out they have 5,000 tons too much milk. And so they have now announced that they are telling all of their growers to try not to milk as much as possible, to stop milking, and they are going to prepare to be dumping 5,000 tons of unused milk that could have been used for butter, ice cream, all of the stuff, but they've got too much of it lying around. Apparently there are a couple of factors. A big one is that due to the COVID pandemic, a lot of the purchases of dairy products, for example, for schools and workplaces and so on, have just stopped buying. The industrial bulk buying of dairy products has stopped. But also they overcompensated. They are basically like a drunk driver at the wheel of a Mack truck going side to side across a 6-lane highway, just taking everyone out. That's what they're doing right now. And they can't produce the right. If they were managing their grid, every house would have just exploded right now, with butter, of course, or milk. So yeah, raw milk, they've swung from the medium barrier to the other side of the road now, and they've got too much and they're tossing it away. Apart from the fact that this just shows how completely incompetent they are at managing dairy or anything agricultural for something that's not a security thing for Japan, and that Japanese consumers do not need to be subjected to this. You would think, well, at least there must be one upside. At least there is enough butter, and certainly there is enough butter. No butter shortages at the moment. I actually have 2 blocks of butter in the fridge right now. I've been storing up since the crisis. But the internet reacted, wait a minute, they are, if they've got this huge oversupply that they've got to dump all this milk, why is everything so expensive? the laws of supply and demand say that dairy products should be like more affordable if there is an oversupply. Why is everything so freaking expensive? It's not cheap. It's like, if there's an oversupply and they're throwing the stuff away, why don't they just sell it more cheaply and give us extra ice cream and cheese and stuff which will last longer? Why are they just throwing it away? Make it into butter. It will last longer. Freeze it. That people making all these suggestions, like, what is wrong with these people? And the problem is that basically you've got, just absolutely incompetent. I see what I just said. Japan is and the LDP is more socialist than you'd think. In some aspects, it's actually more socialist than even extreme failed socialist economies think. This is North Korean style economic management, and this is why it doesn't work. And all they have to do is let in imported stuff, and none of this is a problem. But anyway, so yes, there is a butter situation happening. Not that much, Tess. The whole milk thing sounds pretty much like Europe in the 80s when butter was dumped into the ocean to stabilize prices. Oh, indeed, the big joke about the grape mountain and the milk lake and that they always used to. I mean, the cap, by the way, coming from New Zealand, where New Zealand was a victim of the CAP, of the European Common Agricultural Policy. From where I was in New Zealand, it was ridiculous. And again, I kind of understand the context of why they did it. The same reason as Japan. They wanted to make sure that they never have a situation where people are starving and there are food shortages in Europe ever again, and they succeeded. But again, they've kind of gotten better at tuning it over the years, and part of what they've gotten better at is learning that they don't have to control everything because it doesn't work. They can actually manage supply with open trade. Japan hasn't learned that yet. So yeah, Japan is like, I suppose you're right, like Europe in the 70s and the 80s, at least how they're managing this stuff. Where are they going to dump it? I don't know, but I want to go there and get a couple of bottles and make some milk, make some butter from it. I mean, 5,000 tons. Where do you dump? I mean, think about 1 ton of milk is like, that's like a full like petrol tanker. It's like 5,000 tons. Where do they even keep that stuff? I mean, it's just so crazy. Anyway, so that is what is happening with that. I present Miss Universe Japan at the next Miss Universe pageant. The Japan representative will be wearing this garment, which has the word Japan written across her chest, with Japanese flags dangling off the arms while she holds 2 cats. Beauty pageants are a complex affair. There was a time, I mean, in New Zealand when we only had 2 channels, they used to actually show Miss Universe, and I'd watch it like a sporting event, keep the scores and all that sort of stuff. But, they've always been a little bit dubious, but at least there was a measure of classiness, or at least attempted classiness. Even if they weren't classy, they were trying to pretend to be classy. I mean, as classy as you can be while having women go through bikinis and scoring them, but, it's always been problematic. It's never really been popular in Japan. And in Japan, they talk about how the people who win, honestly, they win because, frankly speaking, the number of people who are interested in going into Western beauty pageants in Japan are like, 30 people go to a contest in Roppongi, and they're all basically, either they they pick them up from the bars afterwards, or they've been on exchanges overseas and they thought it might be a good idea. And, they're not. And the type of people who win, the people who run Miss Universe Japan, are usually foreigners, and they're trying to create somebody, they're trying to get somebody who will win in the international pageant who doesn't really correspond to what Japanese generally typically. The same issues with China, by the way, that the concepts of beauty are quite different. And so Japanese are always like, this is the Japan representative, and it's a horror. Again, the fact that you're even having this debate about, is this person beautiful enough, like, it's just so completely out of date. This is like what Donald Trump brought to the world. So all the problems, brought into this, but it's just never been a thing in Japan, other than it just occasionally shocks people. And my analogy looking at this is like, it's like the Miss Universe organization has stopped trying to win Japanese people over. It's like the monkeys in the zoo that like are no longer trying to like please and gain the attention of the by people going by. They're just throwing crap at them now. Writing, for a start, just putting the word Japan on even clothing is kind of like considered really kind of vulgar in Japan, but actually writing it on the skin is part of the you know, the flags. I mean, are you kidding me? I guess if it was the Australian version, it would like have oi 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 written across, and probably it would be lower cut than that. They would be hanging out. And honestly, I think if the Australia tried to take on the version of this, they'd be in jail. I don't know. I mean, seriously, like, yeah. So that said, again, the internet reactions to this are funny. Somebody pointed out, they've written Japan on her. I see. And someone said, well, come think of it, if they didn't write Japan on her, no one from Japan would recognize her as being from Japan. So I guess it makes sense. There's just, man, you talk about, all attempts at classiness have been set aside, and now it's just pure attention grabbing in the worst possible way. This is basically like this is awful. So and again, the fact I've even spent a minute dignifying this by talking about it shows that there is a problem. It shows a bigger problem. But yes, that is a thing. Tokyo has announced that they will have a same-sex partnership system registered and rolled out in 2022. I do appreciate the fact that in Japan, that while it's been slow, it hasn't been a big civil rights thing like it's been in a lot of other countries. At the same time, it's happening just with a sense of, yeah, why not? Of course, what's the problem? It's great to live in a country without, Christian morality, honestly, or at least the negative aspects of, people taking Christian morality, which I don't think actually interpreted properly should have a problem with this, and converting it into, self-righteous bigotry. You don't have that aspect of these debates in Japan. People just say, yeah. And so, yeah, Japan's going to allow same-sex people to register as legal partners with marriage rights. And what the hell would be the problem with not doing it, especially in a Buddhist country, right? Majority Buddhist, if there's anything. Oh, man, we're over time, and I have topics. Okay, I'm just going to charge through this. YouTube is re-releasing MyChan TV. They used to have this collections feature where if you have too many subscriptions, you could organize them into bundles where you could basically make your subscriptions more manageable and navigable, and they got rid of it. And I had so many subscriptions, and I couldn't manage them anymore, and it was unbearable not being able to keep up with the subscriptions feed. I made an app, which I ran for 3 years, which you all know about, MyChan TV, because YouTube deprecated this feature that let you do that. Now they're bringing it back, and they're calling it a sneak peek at a new feature. It's an old feature that they killed, and now they're bringing back. Fine, please. I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm glad I also shut down MyChan TV a couple of months ago because it would be rendered meaningless by this. Although it doesn't show that they actually have the same sort of channel subscription management features that I thought were vital for the app as well. I mean, it's one thing to be able to organize your subscriptions into bundles where you can watch similarly genred things, like as a way to watch and keep up with your feeds. But it's another thing as well when where every channel is telling people, click subscribe and ring the button for notifications. Every channel says that now. So even if you've had someone who's been faithfully watching a lot of channels for 2 or 3 years, their feeds should be unmanageable by now, and YouTube offers no features to help with this. So I hope they put in some channel management things that allow you to detect and filter and bulk delete like dead channels and stuff like that. All the features that I had. In fact, I've tweeted out, YouTube, add me to this beta, because seriously, I'm not the best person in the world to give you feedback on this, because I made it because when you guys screwed it up, and I made it better than you guys made it, frankly. But I'm really glad that YouTube is bringing this back, and I hope that they get it right. It's something that's needed. It is MyChan TV, so there you go. It was. It looks like I decided it was at the right timing to pull the plug on that. Yusuke Maezawa, the founder of Zozotown, which is basically like sort of Amazon or Rakuten, but it's only for fashion, but it's done very well, and he's gotten very rich. SpaceX is going to fly him around the moon at some point soon, but in the meantime, he is up on the ISS as a tour. He's going up twice, and he's taken his Instagram manager with him, who is just taking photos of him in space. So I've subscribed to his feed. Again, I know there's a lot of backlash against billionaires, treating space as a playground instead of feeding, all the poor people around the world. And they are doing that too, but at the same time, yes, I think this sort of stuff opens the door towards commercialization and to not only the ability for us to go visit and become tourists ourselves eventually, but also for things like mining and energy and all the other things which are accelerating ahead and are things that could now happen in my lifetime that I'm super excited about. So I'm going to follow the Instagram. I think it's super cool that he's up there. I mean, I don't think it's a sign of, Rome is about to collapse decadence, that people are going into space. I think this is actually, they are opening the door on the next wave of human civilization in the same way as, for better and for all the terrible consequences of the world starting to connect, together 5 centuries ago, and all the things that followed from that, and the Industrial Revolution, all these things. It's the same level of significance with people going into space, and a lot of the explorers who went out and started colonizing the rest of the world were absolute horrible dickheads. In fact, they were much worse than these billionaires. This is quite mild by comparison, but in the end of the day, the lasting impact, I think, is on that level. So I'm excited about this. Cowboy Bebop has been discontinued, or it's been cancelled after just 1 season. I shared this on Twitter. I've never watched the anime series. I've seen clips of it. I know what it is. I know generally what it's about, but I'm just not from the anime fan generation that came to Japan. So I kind of watched it with an open mind. I started watching the first episode. I know it was sort of intended to recreate the same sort of stylized sort of anime sort of stuff. But it ended up, when I watched it, it just felt stilted, and I got kind of bored and confused, and I gave up after half an episode. I feel like I should give it another try. I thought it might be good to watch it, given that I don't know the anime. I'd be watching it without the prejudice or high expectations of the anime. But I kind of found it hard to. I love John Cho. I think he's a great actor. I love Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, one of my favorite movies ever. He's got a pass forever just based on being in that movie. But I just couldn't get into Cowboy Bebop. The real life version of it. So yeah, I'll try watching it again, but anyway, it's been cancelled. Some videos, finally 2 videos I recommend. One I just mentioned at the start of the video, Extra History, has just started a series on the rise of Japanese militarism, but it's told in this really great storytelling kind of a way that's really engaging, and I really love this channel. I highly recommend going and subscribing and watching this series. Maybe wait for a few weeks until the series is complete. You can watch it all at once, but I'm watching it week by week, and I love it. Also, there is another channel that I love. There's a few channels that I love to follow that I always watch when they put out new videos, and one is called Toy Galaxy. It's literally a nostalgia channel, probably for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s. But basically, they look at a lot of toys and cartoons and famous pop culture, but sort of aimed at children, I guess, mostly during those sort of years, and the stories behind them. And Voltron, the story of Voltron is, apart from that, I of course remember Voltron as a cartoon that I watched in New Zealand as a kid, and never, I guess, looking back, you could sort of figure out, this was from Japan, but it was a coherent, you'd watch it in English and think it was American or whatever. But the story of all of these, same with Transformers, same with all the other franchises, of how they started out with the interactions with the Japanese rights holders that had the toys, the animation. They just went and bought all the animated stuff, and then they tried to figure out, they carved them up and they made new stories out of them, and they relabeled all the toys and they sold them. It was an easy to sell sort of a product. Just the funniest thing about Voltron was, the idea was that they wanted to go and buy 3 series that they had sort of seen at a Japanese sort of toy fair. And they called up Toei and they said, hey, we want those 3 series. We want this one with all the robots, and this one with, the 3 things, and this one with the robot lions, and the one with the lions. And apparently Japan at the time had multiple robot lion series, and they sent the wrong one. And yet that became Voltron. They got the wrong one, and they just all of these sorts of things, just incredible. It shows just the impact of Japanese culture on Japan. It's a fantastic story. It's a great channel, just the way that they tell the stories behind all of these things. Highly recommend. And that is all the topics that I had for this week. I am 10 minutes over as usual, but what can you do? Cobra Stenchi, real life animations of anime rarely work out. Yeah, that is true. The new Sonic the Hedgehog 2 trailer, by the way, looks really good. I mean, I didn't expect to like Sonic that much either. That was really good. I mean, Jim Carrey just he was like made for that sort of a role, but it was awesome. Anyway, quick scan for any final comments directed at me, and thank heavens there are not, because I've got to wrap up. We've got the J-Vlog, Yeah, the Miss Universe thing, that was a thing that happened. We've got Auntie Liana in Yokohama. Whoa, nice to see Auntie Liana. I follow you on Twitter. I recognize the handle. Great to see you here in the chat. Thanks for thanks for dropping in and leaving a hello. And everybody else, remember to like if you like, because remember, that's the only thing I do. I do these videos for, it's even cheaper than peanuts. So please like if you like the video. Come back and join me again next week, 10:30 p.m. Japan Standard Time. I have nowhere to go, nothing better to do. I'm locked up in a pandemic room. You can see this is my universe. It's good to be with you all every week. Thanks for keeping me company. Thanks for all the great comments. RCD Miller. Nice emoji there. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Do all that good thing. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram. I don't really care about Facebook, honestly. I still put stuff up there, but I really don't engage there. If you want to engage with me on Twitter or Instagram. And have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. Don't get the Rona. Wingstar. Nice to see you, Wingstar. Glad you could stop by. Have a good week, everybody. I'll see you later. Peace. Boom. Any stream.